Happy Friday, everyone. New at 4, another person has been arrested for attempted murder in Grand Forks after his roommate was found with his neck cut by a knife. Police say it happened on Saturday in the 1700 block of Cottonwood Street. The victim was taken to the hospital for treatment. After an investigation, police arrested 29-year-old Joshua Franklin for attempted murder. The case was sent to the state's attorney's office to determine what formal charges will be filed. Officials have now identified the body found burned in a home following a fire in rural Clay County. The Clay County Sheriff's Department says the body is 76-year-old Terry Steinweg of Hawley, Minnesota. Authorities say he died from smoke inhalation. On March 12th, when crews arrived on scene, that home was engulfed in flames and multiple fire departments worked to get that fire under control. In the aftermath, a construction company found the body while clearing debris. We have new information on a bridge that was set on fire near Dent. Construction is set to start Monday. The County Highway 41 bridge at Star Lake was set on fire in September 2020. Ryan Johnson was convicted for the crime and sentenced to 5 years in prison with credit for time served, 10 years supervised probation, and he agreed to pay more than $1 million in restitution. Investigators say he told a neighbor he was going to blow up the bridge after someone ran over and killed his dog. Court documents say matches, ammunition, a shotgun, and drugs were all found inside his home. Authorities also found several propane cylinders under the bridge. Fire officials are investigating the cause of a blaze in West Fargo's downtown neighborhood. Firefighters were called out to 107 Cheyenne Street just after 10:30 last night. That's a laundromat and hair salon. 2 dryers and the contents were burnt, but there's no structural damage to the building. Well, take a look at this. Cold, warm, snowing, raining. We've seen a lot of mixed weather this week, and the weekend is shaping up to show just about every kind of weather across different parts of the valley. Hutch is here with a first look at the forecast. Hutch?
Thanks, Stacy. Ouch. We call that weather whiplash in these parts, and that's spring in the northern plains. Now, we look down at our Dakota Magic Casino camera showing dry streets down there for the most part right now. A lot of cloud cover has made its way into the valley. And here is what we are expecting as we head into our evening hours. First and foremost, we definitely have a little activity showing up on the radar. The cloud-free areas up to the north, but we have rain moving through our southern counties and particularly out to the west. Now this activity here, the very light green we just showed you, not really all that wet, so maybe a sprinkle making its way down or mist. But where we see the darker green shades here, that's a little bit heavier rain, and it's making its way into places like the Stutsman County, up near Carrington and down near Eureka, South Dakota. So it'll be in that Eureka, South Dakota area by 4:26, possibly in towards Jamestown by 4:45. Out west is where the warmer temperatures are. How about near 60 degrees? Stacy, out in Jamestown, here where we have the snow on the ground, things are blue and cool, and temperatures closer to 40. Hard to melt snow when you have the clouds and the cool pile of snow on the ground. Look at Grand Forks, 51 wonderful degrees there. Your planner for Fargo, cloudy skies for the evening. Temperatures will hover and slowly fall here. Because you're in the 50s, you'll see a pretty faster, never mind. It's just going to get cool tonight. It's kind of hard to talk, but I've got a lot to talk about for the weekend as it remains unsettled. We'll have details on that and a first alert weather day for next week. All those forecast facts in a few minutes.
All right, thanks so much, Hutch. And now in our continuing coverage of the war on Ukraine, Russian officials are claiming 2 Ukrainian military helicopters struck a fuel depot in Russia, marking the first accusation of a Ukrainian airstrike on Russian soil since the invasion began. The regional governor said helicopters struck the facility and the resulting blaze injured 2 workers, while some areas of the city were being evacuated. However, the Russian oil firm that owns the fuel depot said in a separate statement no one was hurt in the fire, though it gave no information on its cause. Surveillance camera footage obtained by the Associated Press today is said to show a missile hitting the fuel depot. Ukrainian officials say they can't confirm or deny their involvement in that explosion. The war in Ukraine shows it's almost impossible to live a normal life when fighting is going on around you. More than 4 million people have fled from the country since Russia invaded 5 weeks ago, but 90% of the country's population has stayed, trying to do their work and support their families. Reporter Deborah Pata spoke to some of the people who have found a way to function in the chaos all around them.
People have fled the worst of the war to the relative safety of Kiev and surrounding towns. In Brovary, Katya found shelter in this kindergarten with her 4 children after her home burnt down. Now she shares a classroom with over 25 other people.
Are you worried that the Russians could come here?
Of course we're worried about it, she says. Nowhere is completely safe in the capital, where air sirens and distant shelling have become the soundtrack of daily life. The streets have emptied out.
This is the heart of the city. It used to be a vibrant center. Now it's a fortified military zone.
Before the war, Victor was an electrician. He last picked up a gun during his mandatory conscription 12 years ago. At the beginning, I was astounded at what's happening, he said. Then I realized it's not a joke. It's actually a patriotic war. Incredibly, grocery stores are still open. And when there is no physical comfort to be found, there is always the spiritual. Prayers for peace have never been more urgent. In underground bars turned bunkers, young volunteers relax and tell war stories. Outside, others mix cocktails, the Molotov kind. Instead of partying the night away, they also provide food and shelter for exhausted fighters. Max Palienko walks to work every morning to open up his basement flower shop. Instead of a gun, he's holding out a hand of friendship, selling flowers and hope.
It's my job. Bring a smile and happiness. I'm staying in Kiev.
Katya and her kids are here to stay too. They have nowhere else to go.
Are you scared?
We are, she says.
You're scared of the alarms and when there's big bangs?
No.
Lives turned upside down by war. For CBS, Deborah Patter, Kyiv, Ukraine.
The U.S. imposed sanctions on 5 North Korean entities today in response to 2 ballistic missile tests conducted in February and March, authorized under an existing executive order targeting producers and supporters of weapons of mass destruction. The sanctions come after Japan issued its own penalties this week on 4 groups and 9 individuals tied to missile development. The U.S. government determined that the launches involved a new ballistic missile, which could potentially be disguised as a space launch. While most of America is lifting COVID restrictions, one of the world's biggest cities has been shut down. Shanghai, home to about 25 million people, is largely at a standstill today as China battles its worst wave of COVID infections since the start of the pandemic in 2020. This lockdown has raised questions about China's so-called zero COVID strategy. It was supposed to just last a few days, rolled out in stages to minimize disruption, but the plan has been abandoned, and now most of Shanghai, China's largest and wealthiest city, has been shut down with no telling when life could get back to normal. Residents have been barricaded in their homes, allowed out only for COVID testing. Even infants are being screened. Frustration is widespread over panic buying and persistent food shortages.
You know, right now the medicine is worse than the disease. We have people who are dying because they can't get access to medical care. How many people have actually died from this recent surge of COVID? And the government has told us 0.
Again, it's unclear just how long Shanghai's mass lockdown will last. Residents are bracing for weeks of home confinement, but despite the strain on residents, China vows it will maintain its zero COVID policy. The United Nations says poverty has reached a breaking point in Afghanistan, and out of desperation, some parents are taking almost unbelievably drastic steps. CBS's Tina Kraus reports from London.
Humanitarian aid is on the way, but the UN says it's not coming nearly fast enough for 9 million people in Afghanistan on the brink of starvation.
People are already selling their children and their body parts in order to feed their families.
These men all have the same scar from having their kidneys removed to sell for thousands of dollars on the black market. Nuruddin says he didn't want to go under the knife, but did it for his children and regrets it now because he's in so much pain he can't work. Afghanistan was already one of the poorest countries in the world, but when the Taliban seized power last year, millions were plunged further into poverty as international sanctions sent food prices surging. This mother says, "We have nothing to eat. I must now make a choice, sell my daughter or my kidney." After years of drought and the war in Ukraine driving up prices for grain, it's estimated 95% of Afghans don't have enough to eat.
We count on you
to disburse your generous pledges.
International donors pledged $2.4 billion in humanitarian aid this week, but the UN says Afghans will need twice that much to endure the crisis. Tina Kraus, CBS News.
The U.S. has pledged to give another $204 million in aid to the people of Afghanistan. That brings America's total humanitarian assistance to Afghans to $4.6 billion over the last 20 years. Dozens of flights along the West Coast were canceled today as Alaska Airlines pilots picketed during ongoing contract negotiations with the airline. More than 100 flights were canceled. The bargaining actions come as air travel rebounds to pre-pandemic levels and demand is surging with spring break for the long-delayed vacations. According to the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport website, no afternoon or evening flights by Alaska Airlines were canceled or delayed. Minnesota lawmakers are announcing a bipartisan deal to extend the state's healthcare reinsurance program. The agreement will help hold down premiums for about 167,000 Minnesotans who get their coverage in the individual marketplace, whether it's the state-run MNsure exchange or directly from carriers. Negotiators say premiums would have gone up by a minimum of 20 to 25% this fall without a deal by today.